Hey, let's talk about the most powerful speech ever written. A speech so heartfelt and passionate it forced me to look inward and ask some big questions about who I was and what I wanted. And no, I'm not talking about Uncle Iroh's speech from Avatar: The Last Airbender, but I do watch that speech all the time. I'm talking about the Charlie Chaplin speech from The Great Dictator. Yeah, the silent film guy. What, you didn't know he made a talkie? Yeah, in 1940, Charlie Chaplin made an absolute mockery of Hitler, as the Nazis were seizing power in Europe and the United States was neutral.
What makes a man turn neutral?
About once a year, ever since I've known what YouTube was, I've watched this speech and it never fails to bring me to tears. And never more so than now, for some reason. Weird. Watching this speech is, in many ways, watching somebody explain my entire worldview with more passion and awe-inspiring talent than I could ever muster on this channel. This stands the test of time. So before we do anything else, let's just watch this speech in its entirety. So I'm not just like saying things without context. Just kidding. My video got taken down for a copyright claim, so it looks like I've got to give this speech myself. I'm sorry, but I don't want to be an emperor. That's not my business. I don't want to conquer anyone. I should like to help people, if possible. Jew, Gentile, black man, white. We all want to help one another. Human beings are like that. We want to live by each other's happiness, not by each other's misery. We don't want to hate or despise anybody. In this world, there's room for everyone. And the good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. The way of life can be beautiful, but we've lost the way. Greed has poisoned men's souls, barricaded the world with hate, has goose-stepped us into misery and bloodshed. We've developed speed, but we've shut ourselves in. Machinery that gives us abundance has left us in want. Our knowledge has made us cynical. Our cleverness hard and unkind. We think too much and feel too little. More than machinery, we need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness and gentleness. Without these qualities, life would be violent and all will be lost. The airplane and the radio have brought us closer together. The very nature of these inventions cries out for the goodness in man, cries out for universal brotherhood, for the unity of us all. Even now, my voice is reaching millions throughout the world. Millions of despairing men, women, and little children. Victims of a system that makes men torture and imprison innocent people. To those who can hear me, I say do not despair. The misery that is upon us now is but the passing of greed. The bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass and dictators die. And the power that they took from the people will be returned to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will not perish. Soldiers, don't give yourself to brutes, men who despise you, enslave you, regiment your lives, tell you what to do and what to think and what to feel, who drill you, diet you, and treat you like cattle, use you as cannon fodder. Do not give yourself to these unnatural men with machine minds and machine hearts. You are not machines, you are not cattle, you are men. You have the love of humanity in your hearts. You do not hate. Only the unloved hate. The unloved and the unnatural. Soldiers, don't fight for slavery. Fight for liberty. In the 17th chapter of St. Luke, it is written, the kingdom of God is within man. Not one man, not a group of men, but all men. You, the people, have the power to create machines, the power to create happiness. You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful, to make this life a wonderful adventure. And in the name of democracy, let us use that power. Let us unite. Let us fight for a new world, a decent world that gives men the chance to work, that will give youth a future and old age security. By the promise of these things, brutes have risen to power, but they lie. They do not fulfill that promise. They never will. Dictators free themselves, but they enslave the people. Now let us fight to fulfill that promise. Let us fight to free the world, to do away with national barriers, to do away with greed, with hate, and intolerance. Let's fight for a world of reason, a world where science and progress will lead to all men's happiness. Soldiers, in the name of democracy, let us unite. The speech is incredible, isn't it? A lot of people call that the greatest speech ever given, me included. And for good reason. One of the people that helped Charlie Chaplin pen that speech was the Grape of Wrath himself, John Steinbeck. What struck me the first time I watched it was how it mirrored speeches that Hitler had actually given. You always hear about how Hitler had this like ramping quality to his speeches where he'd start off really quiet and then build up to a crescendo of just like shouting nonsense gibberish, which would leave you hanging on his every nonsense word.
trifft das Sauerkraut mit der Juden.
This is how good cult leaders and propagandists pull you into their orbit and drive a wedge between you and your friends and family who just aren't into all the hate speech. And by 1940, Chaplin was a seasoned veteran of Hollywood. He'd seen plenty of desperate weirdos clawing for power. And let's think about where he was at in his career here. The silent era was dying, and this was a man who just had his entire identity ripped away from him by an egomaniacal maniac. That mustache is forever tainted. Think about it, you still get weird looks at parties if you dress up like Charlie Chaplin. What's that mustache, man? So, this was personal.
Du, das kleine Banana! Der Banana stimmt ein Strepp mit seiner und ein singt der Banana! Der Banana? Der dicke Buben ist dicker, du Strepp mit seiner Banana! Banana!
Okay, so The Great Dictator is still a movie, right? Outside of just this speech. And it's a really good one. So in the movie, written and directed and starred in by Charlie Chaplin, the plot splits itself between two characters. First is Charlie Chaplin's classic tramp character. He does a little classic hop every time he goes around a corner. And the tramp in this movie is a Jewish barber, and the movie opens with him becoming a war hero in World War I. Second is Adenoid Henkel, dictator of Tomania. This is a parody of Hitler, obviously, and he's not at all silent. And remember, this is Chaplin's first non-silent movie, so he goes all out with Henkel. And another really quick aside here, the names in this movie, oh my God. Adenoid Henkel is one of those Bandersnatch Cabbage Patch names for Benedict Cumberbatch. Chef's kiss. There's also Benzino Napoloni, Benito Mussolini, and Henkel's right-hand man, Garbish, garbage. That's a hidden secret with satire. You need great names. I think the very first Clickhole article I ever read, the name of the person in the article was Brumbo Tungus. Another chef kiss. Anyway, the movie literally splits its time between these two characters. The tramp comes home to find that the police have painted Jew on his barbershop, which is also now at the heart of a ghetto. And then Henkel, who's trying to orchestrate the invasion of his neighboring country of Austerlitz, while also hosting and trying to one-up his fellow dictator Napoloni. As a running theme with dictators here is that they always try and one-up each other. Apparently Chaplin and the guy playing Napoloni were trying to one-up each other on set all the time, which is their exact dynamic in the movie. It's great. And then spoiler, eventually we have a prince and pauper situation where the barber, who's played by Charlie Chaplin, is mistaken for Henkel, who's played by Charlie Chaplin, obviously. So the barber has to go up at the end and give a big old speech. A speech that in its day, people hated.
Walter Kerr called it the last 5 minutes and the worst 5 minutes of The Great Dictator.
And it's all because, I guess the barber talks out of character here. The whole movie he's very quiet and timid, and then here he, works himself up into a shouting crescendo. I mean, watch the movie, man. The guy is timid the entire time, and this is him finally standing up to fascism. The whole point of the movie. In 1511, this Dutch guy named Desiderius Erasmus, sick name, wrote this satirical essay called Moirae Encomium. Yeah, he wrote it in Latin. And that translates to In Praise of Folly. In this story, Erasmus creates this character named Stultitia, who's the goddess of folly and serves as the story's narrator. And through the voice of folly, Erasmus absolutely lambasted aspects of society, including the church, various scholars of the time, and political rulers. By using a character called Folly, he could say things that he just couldn't say otherwise. This is the art of saying without saying. Something the people of the silent era, who were all well-versed in mime, were real good at. Silent film's the definition of saying without saying. The implication of Erasmus's essay is that the people we usually think are most wise in society, philosophers, scholars, theologians, really, we think they're smart? Sometimes say the dumbest stuff. Take Jordan Peterson, for instance.
You have to understand that the reality of the concepts of your question, when you're digging that deep, are just as questionable as what you're questioning.
These people get so wrapped up in their theories and arguments that they lose touch with practical reality and common sense.
So people say to me, do you believe in God? And I think, okay, there's a couple of mysteries in that question. What do you mean do? What do you mean you? What do you mean believe? And what do you mean God?
I mean, look at the man's suits.
This is a Twitter suit. These are tiny Elon Musk heads. Turns out I like this. I didn't think I would necessarily, this kind of powder blue with beige, but it seems to be real nice. This is a heaven and hell suit, so it's quite fun. So
which one's hell?
Hell's red, Joe. Come on, Jesus.
But that's not really red.
Well,
it's like a magenta.
It's stylish.
Right?
Yeah, it's okay. Hell's magenta. You know?
On the other hand, people who society might consider foolish, like the jester, the tramp, or people who are usually referred to as common folk, sometimes say the most profound and insightful truths of anybody.
Don't just keep talking until you think of something. You may not.
So according to Erasmus, a jester, precisely because of their perceived lack of wisdom, has the freedom to speak truth when other people can't. That's what gives them power. This is why people like Hasanabi thought that Alex Jones was a CIA plant for years.
That's part of the reason why I've always found him to be like potentially a federal agent until recently when this stuff happened to him, because he seemingly was untouchable, right? Like in the 90s, he kept talking about the surveillance state, and it was just completely correct.
I mean, what better way to bury the truth than filtering it through a guy who only speaks lies?
If you're the feds and you want to discredit like a lot of the crazy that you're doing that people would look at and go, what, that's crazy. You want a guy like Alex Jones to be saying some of the truthful things and then simultaneously say like insane stuff as though there are interdimensional space vampires.
Okay, so now we can define the jester's paradox, which is this. The very costume that allows a jester to speak truth to power also undermines their credibility. Imagine somebody trying to give a TED talk on the unified theory of everything while wearing an inflatable dinosaur costume. Sure, people are gonna listen, but are they really gonna listen? Maybe. Here's an interesting thing about comedy. There's a more or less proportional relationship between the absurdity of comedy that you can get away with and the weight of emotional truth contained within your message. I mean, at least when it comes to comedy with a message. I can't really explain why Charlie the Unicorn is funny to me.
Oh, they took my freaking kidney.
Okay, so let's take Everything Everywhere All at Once, one of my favorite movies of all time. This movie's allowed to be as absurd as it is because it's also trying to break your heart and speak directly to the black spots on your soul. So if you take anything away from this entire video, just remember this: comedy doesn't land without weight. Everything Everywhere All at Once is a really interesting comparison to The Great Dictator because the characters in it are effectively also playing this dual reality. Each character has their badass other selves that are in different positions of power, and we see how that affects their lives despite being the exact same people in every single world. And when you make movies like Everything Everywhere All at Once and The Great Dictator, people are naturally a little confused. Like, is it a comedy, a drama, a political statement? What is this?
I don't know what the heck is going on.
Yes, shoving all these things together allows the audience to confront uncomfortable truths about human nature and societal structures, while also providing the emotional distance necessary to process it all. Like the purpose of movies and comedy all wrapped into one. This painting is called Stancyzk during a ball at the court of Queen Bona in the face of the loss of Smolensk by Jan Matjeko, painted in 1862. You may know this though from the back of the Lady Gaga album Harlequin, which is I guess the accompanying album to Joker 2, Poignant. Now Stancyzk is maybe one of the most famous jesters of all time, and a Polish folk hero who, quote, embodied satire to criticize social problems while also offering wisdom to the common people. My kind of guy. Now, in this painting, we see Stancyzk looking utterly miserable and depressed, while in the background, there's a big fancy party going on. Now, why is Stancyzk so sad? On the table, there's a letter announcing that the Grand Duchy of Lithuania has lost Smolensk to the Grand Duchy of Moscow. Basically, Moscow invaded Lithuania and annexed part of the country. I don't know if you know this, but that's like their whole thing. They're doing it right now. The tragedy here is that Stancyzk, the jester, who's supposed to be the life of the party, seems to be the only one who understands the gravity of the situation. At least enough not to throw a party. Tacky. And then over here outside the window, there's a comet which was allegedly supposed to portend the downfall of the Polish Empire, along with Orion's belt. Orion being the Greek hunter who, blinded by ego, gets stung by a scorpion and dies. The Great Dictator is Chaplin's sad clown movie. You can see it in the depressed demeanor of the tramp, in how he moves about his life in a daze, unable to comprehend or accept what's become of his home. And for everyone who's already typed in the comment section that this movie was just propaganda propaganda from America? Yes, it was. FDR approved of this speech personally and even had Chaplin give the speech at his third inauguration. What an inauguration that would have been. FDR encouraged Chaplin to make this movie as quickly as possible. The United States was remaining neutral during World War II.
I have no strong feelings one way or the other.
Worrying about what was happening across the sea in Europe was way less important than worrying about what was happening in the United States during the Great Depression. Production of this movie started in 1938, and less than a year later, Nazis were rallying in New York City. Chaplin was urgent. 10 years earlier, after writing an anti-Semitic diatribe in the newspaper that he owned, Henry Ford effectively had the 1924 election on lock that year. But the major political parties at the time ended that behind closed doors and removed him from the ticket, going directly against the will of the people instead of letting an anti-Semitic demagogue who was cozying up to dictators take power.
He'll deal with a medieval maniac more than he thinks.
Where Stancyzk was a political folk hero to the common people of his day, Chaplin served the same role in the 20th century. His movies and his character, the Tramp, often depicted working class people struggling under capitalism. And he became an outspoken opponent of McCarthy-era America. That's a stain we still haven't removed from our flag. A stain that even saw Chaplin himself exiled from the United States under suspicion of communism. We like to think that it can't happen here, but forget that it already has. And will continue to without constant vigilance against it. Fascism is like this test in a lot of ways, of whether or not power can corrupt you. It's the natural tendency of the people at the top to want to stay at the top, and a depressingly easy way to do that is through dominance and subjugation. Noam Chomsky famously said the easiest way to conquer a people is to create an imaginary enemy and then convince them that you're saving them from them. This is one of the easiest ways to understand how fascism operates and how to unravel its web of thought. Satire like The Great Dictator can't topple dictators, and it cannot prevent the rise of fascism. But don't underestimate the power of art to inspire, educate, and mobilize. The Great Dictator did not single-handedly defeat Nazi Germany, but it definitely rallied American support against it. And the jester might not be able to sway the mind of a king, but what about those stuck in their court, forced to deal with their petty narcissistic whims? The true power of the jester is that they're able to speak to everyone, not just those in positions of perceived power. And now I want to end with what the DVD commentary track ended with, which I think sums pretty much all of this up perfectly.
In fact, I met a woman recently who was 90 years old, and I asked her about The Great Dictator, and she hadn't seen it since then. The only memory she had was, it was wonderful, it was so funny. I asked her about the speech, and she said, oh, the whole thing was wonderful, it was so funny. She remembered it as a great comedy film. And other people I've talked to from that era remember that as well. This was a sticking point. This was a thorn in the side of the film, and in a sense, it set Chaplin on a path that resulted in his exile because he became a political spokesman. He started giving speeches, and ultimately this is what resulted in his exile.
But he wanted to say this. He had something to say, and he said to his critics, look, they've had their fun for 2 hours. Now I need to speak. Garbage's speech literally wakes the barber up and has really boxed him into a corner, as Schultz tells him.
You must speak. I can't. You must. It's our only hope.
The idea that our better selves are going to prevail is, in fact, ridiculous. It's as ridiculous and wonderful and heartbreaking as trying to stop fascism with a funny film. And it must have seemed even more ridiculous in 1940, with the skies growing darker every day with the clouds of war. But as Schultz, the good German, tells the barber, it's our only hope.